Okay, so I think we're live. Welcome to everyone who's joined the Convex community live stream. So what we're going to be doing on this one is we're going to be talking about account abstraction and the ERC-4337 model. And joining me here on Discord should be Rich. Hey, Rich, you there?
I'm here. Hello.
Hey, good to have you. How are you doing?
Good.
Okay, great. So this is a slightly new setup. So we've got it set up so that every member of the community can join on the Discord channel, and we'll be trying casting that out to YouTube Live at the same time. So if this works for everyone, I think it's a good way to sort of have some of these sort of community discussions where we talk about some of the big ideas in the decentralized space.
And this one is going to be interesting because it's about the ERC-4337.
Yeah. So very
There's
interesting
been a
topic.
lot of hype about it.
Indeed. So, I mean, Rich, you picked this topic. Why is it you thought this was particularly interesting to talk about?
Well, it seems that with a lot of people in the Ethereum community, they're pretty hyped about this particular application and the things you can do with it, like creating NFT type wallets and so forth. And I think they're just not aware of what you can actually do out the gate with Convex. And I thought it'd be good to position that so that people understand how easy it is to use Convex, especially from a developer's perspective.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. And it's probably worth spending a bit of time exploring what account abstraction is really all about and why it's interesting and why it's important. And then we can go into some of the more details about how it works in Convex. I would think it's worth maybe just for the purpose of stepping back. What really is the purpose of an account when we talk about one of these decentralized networks? And I think that's something that sometimes gets a bit misunderstood. And one of the reasons it gets misunderstood is people think of like a bank account, yeah, which is a bank account, which
Right.
is just one number, which is just one ledger in a specific currency and you might have, several bank accounts. Whereas an account on a decentralized ledger is kind of a bit different. I think of it less as like a bank account, as more as a means of authorizing transactions. And that account is effectively the security control context that lets you authorize transactions that can control certain kinds of assets and resources. So a single account on Convex might hold 20 different types of currencies or tokens. And it might also have a portfolio of NFTs. And that's all managed and controlled by perhaps one account. Yeah, so it's not just a single number like in a traditional bank account. And I think one of the challenges in some of this space is the mental model that people maybe import from the traditional finance world or the traditional tech world doesn't necessarily 100% translate to the decentralized world. Likewise, when you talk about what it means to own an account, well, in the traditional tech world, if it's Google, YouTube, you've got your email, you've got your user identity. It's an account that's really an account about you as a person. Whereas ownership of account in the decentralized and the crypto world really means, do you have control of the keys that enable you to execute transactions on behalf of that account?
Right.
And it's important to remember those distinctions because when we talk about accounts in Convex, there's a few things about Convex accounts that are maybe a little bit unusual. Yeah, one of which is you can change the keys. Yeah, if you want to rotate the keys and use a different key on a Convex account, you can. So in fact, a Convex account you can transfer to another person just by setting the keys to be their keys, and then they can access the account and you can't access it anymore. And now that's in contrast to maybe some traditional crypto systems where your key effectively defines the account. And if you've got the right key, you can spend the funds. So, more traditional models that have like a crypto public key as the account address, or something derived from the crypto public key as an account address. Those sort of accounts are a little bit different from convex accounts because they're more directly tied to the specific authentication method.
Yeah, like in EVM based, they have a smart contract account, and then they also have the uh, uh, EOA account, right, which is your personal account. And what 4337 does is abstract that so that it allows the user to use a smart contract account and turn it into an EOA account, or EOAs into smart contract enabled accounts.
Yeah, it's
So it's kind of like this mechanism that takes one kind of account and allows you to make believe it's a different kind.
yeah.
Is that
So
even necessary in Convex?
I mean, it's a good question. So you don't really need that in Convex. In Convex, all accounts are effectively created equal. So everything you can do with a what we call an actor, so a smart contract account, can do all of the same things as what would be called an externally owned account, a user account in Ethereum. They have exactly the same capabilities in Convex. They can own assets, they can make transfers, they can execute code, they can compile code, they can deploy new smart contracts. They have the full range of Convex capabilities at their disposal. They can even do things like, stake on peers, or this kind of more administrative sort of roles. So there's no real difference in Convex between a user account and the actor account. The only difference, I would say, is the way in which transactions enter the system. Yeah. So in Convex, a user account, the only way a transaction can come in is if the user signs a transaction with their key. Now, for actor accounts, the only way that they can take any action is if someone else calls them, or there's a special case where you can have a scheduler that makes an actor account, activates it at certain time periods. Now, it's kind of similar in Ethereum, yeah, in the sense you've got externally owned accounts and smart contract accounts. So it's kind of analogous. Difference in Convex, you can actually switch between the two. It's just one very, very simple operation, and an actor account can become a user account and vice versa. So what you can actually do in Convex is set up your smart contract account as you wish. You can modify it up to the point at which you believe it's complete, and then you can turn it into an actor account. Yeah, so it's now a smart contract account, and it's no longer a user account, so you can't send user transactions into that account. And that's kind of useful. Yeah, so if you imagine you've got an account that owns some assets, and you decide, hey, I want to put this account into escrow or something like that, you can actually put it under control of a smart contract, and then at some later point you can take that control back. For example, when some loan has been repaid or something like that. Yeah, you can use these things as collateral. You can use them as, in fact, tradable assets. The accounts themselves can be transferable, and therefore they can be tradable. So you get a bit more flexibility in the convex model, but it's it's at least conceptually similar to the idea that you've got an externally owned account and the idea that you've got a smart contract account. You just have a bit more flexibility in how you use them. What I think the difference is with the account abstraction piece is it's saying, well, in fact, we want to have a different mechanism for users to get their transactions into the system. Yeah. So you still need, sooner or later, to have someone initiate a transaction and pay the fees for that transaction. If you don't charge some fees for a transaction, then you'll leave your system vulnerable to denial of a service attacks. So in the account abstraction model, what's actually happening is the transactions are getting sent to someone called a bundler. And what a bundler does is they take those transactions, decide whether those transactions are legit, And then if they like those transactions, the bundler submits those transactions to the network. Yeah, so you're effectively allowing someone to play this role in the middle, and therefore they're taking the risk on the execution and the transaction fees, the gas fees in the case of Ethereum, juice in the case of Convex. So what it's really about is it's having a standard way that users can submit transactions to a bundler, and a bundler can verify or decide whether they want to submit that transaction. And if they do, hopefully the transaction is going to result in the bundler getting paid. Yeah, right. But the bundler has to take that risk. So a lot of the problem here is, how does the bundler decide whether they're going to submit the transaction on behalf of someone else? Right? Yeah. That is the fundamental problem. It's this: how do you, and you, if you can do that, you can have the bundler can have whatever rules they want on whether they accept transactions. So they might decide, for example, I'm only going to accept transactions from my own customers. Yeah, or right. You know, they can. It's flexible. You're creating this opportunity for people to sort of innovate. Now, the thing is, you can already do that. Yeah, you can already have transactions where if you trust the person that's going to relay the transaction for you, and if they trust you, they can do it on your behalf. Yeah, and that's true on Ethereum. It's true on it's true on Convex as well.
Even before ERC-4337.
Yes, you don't need ERC-4337 to do that. Yeah.
Right.
What ERC-4337 does is it kind of creates a standard protocol by which you can plausibly create transactions where the bundler can verify whether they can safely execute that transaction independently of knowing the person who's submitting it. So it's almost like having a relay where you don't need to know the identity or the personality of the person submitting. So it's a slightly
so it's a delegation
anonymized way of relaying transactions. But it's still relaying transactions. You're still sending the transactions to a bundler, and those bundlers are then including those transactions. So you can almost think of it as like creating an extra mempool layer where people can collect these transactions and then bundle them after verifying that in fact it's sensible for them to do so and that they're going to get paid, which creates problems because, you know, whether a transaction is going to result in you getting paid depends on you being able to simulate that transaction, work out what it's going to do, and then hopefully when you execute it, it's going to behave in the same way. Yeah.
So it increases flexibility, but it sounds like it also increases complexity.
It's definitely, I mean, it definitely is an extra layer of complexity, and you know, does it actually help? And I'm not convinced it actually helps much. Yeah. So I mean, someone's going to have to take the risk when transactions are coming in. So either the bundler's taking the risk, or someone is setting something up on chain and taking the risk that, okay, I'm going to pay for random user transactions. But if someone on chain sets up a smart contract that says, hey, I'm going to pay for anyone's transactions, then you've set yourself up as a DOS target, or at least having your funds drained by malicious transactions. So you know, how hard is it to give a user an externally owned account or user account? You know, it's not very hard. Yeah, I mean, I got to do it now. I mean, I've just got a little convex window here. Sorry, Rich, I put this in front of your face just for demo.
That's fine.
But I can just use the create account. This is a live convex window. I'm just going to use create account. All I need to do is give a public key, and this is not a real public key, but it will do for the purposes of this. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Done. Yeah, that's what it takes to create an account on Convex. And I've just created account number 57 through that process. And if I had the private key associated with that public key, which I sadly don't, because it would be a pretty cool one to have, I would be able to execute transactions on that account. So that's literally all you have to do to create an account on Convex. A smart contract can also do that. So a smart contract can build new accounts and etc. etc. So it's not very hard. One on-chain instruction is enough to create an account for a user. So do you really want to add the extra complexity about account abstraction? I mean, maybe. Yeah, account abstraction means that you can not even create any accounts at all. But accounts in Convex are so lightweight, they're just a few bytes, that it really isn't a problem if people issue them or create them as needed. And you can also recycle accounts in Convex. Yeah, so once accounts are no longer used, you can just resell them, and people can cheaply take over an old account. And you can do that, of course, because you can rotate the public keys. And if you can rotate the public keys, you can transfer ownership in its entirety to the new owner of the account. So it's just simply not that big a problem on Convex. I think where it becomes interesting is, okay, can you get new kinds of user experiences where a user can totally anonymously turn up and start using the system, but then someone's taking the risk for that. Yeah, someone's going to be paying their fees or the cost of whatever interactions they start doing. And if you want to do that, you can already do that. Yeah, because you can already create accounts when a user comes in and requests them. So, I mean, it's an interesting trade-off. It's an interesting area. I'm not yet completely convinced that.
Hey, Mike.
Yep.
Whatever you did is repeating itself. So we're hearing it 20 seconds delayed over and over itself.
Okay. Hopefully that might fix it. I've just turned off a couple of things, so apologies if that upset the audio. A quick question from on chat. So, how does the bundler determine whether they are valid transactions? So that is a super good question. So what happens in ERC-4337 is there are a bunch of sort of smart contract functions that are defined by the ERC. Actually, let me just pull it up. It's probably easiest. Okay, so I'm just dropping it in here. This is the ERC-4337. And you can see that there's some entry point contracts where you can use some of these entry points to basically verify whether you can get paid for executing this transaction or not. Yeah. So a user can send in a transaction. The bundler will simulate some of this functionality and use that to determine whether they are whether they're going to get paid, whether they're going to get distributed fees by executing and including the transaction. Now, if they verify that in fact they are, and it's going to be okay, then they include the transaction. If the verification fails for any reason or it doesn't meet the criteria, then it can just cancel. Yeah, so the bundler won't include the transaction. So basically, the bundler does it by simulation. Yeah, and testing whether the transaction is going to work in a way that meets its contract or meets its expectations. So it's kind of a high level description. That's basically how it works. So yes, that adds a lot of complexity because when you execute something in an on-chain environment, it's not always going to execute in precisely the same way every time. So a lot of the complexity in these account abstraction systems is, well, what can you actually validate, or what is safe to validate, and what isn't safe to validate becomes the challenge of how you can actually determine whether to include these things or not. How long does verification take in Ethereum versus Convex? So I mean, Convex is exceptionally fast, but the point is the verification is something that's done offline. Yeah, it's kind of like an off-chain functionality. So you run it locally in your own environment using your current view of the state of the network. So in both cases, it's pretty fast. I'm sure it'll be faster in Convex, but it's not a problem typically. I mean, unless a bundler was doing particularly large numbers of transactions, I wouldn't have thought it was ever going to be a issue to run this verification code. It's not like you've got to run very complicated calculations. I think this is where my knowledge of the details of ERC-4337 may be a bit hazy, but I believe there's a limit on the amount of gas that can be used for verification. So if the verification itself takes too long, then it's considered to have failed. Yeah, so the bundler can control the amount of risk they take by running the verification code through that kind of method. But good question. I mean, some of these things are quite tunable as well. Yeah. And the nice thing about this model is it does let you have transactions coming in that don't really have a user account associated with them, and they still get executed in some way via some kind of smart contract logic. So the challenge is this extra layer of complexity, and the is it really a problem to have user accounts in a lot of cases? Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I mean, I think as a user myself, I would probably want the security of knowing I actually own an account, or I own at least some very robust way of being able to control the assets within my account.
One of the things that the literature had said is that it eliminates the need to manage complicated wallet key phrases, private keys, and individual signing of transactions. I'm not exactly sure if that's a benefit or how we would do that in Convex.
So I think it just moves it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So you're still going to need to, if someone's going to pay for this user's transaction, someone needs to verify their authenticity. Yeah. So, and does that necessarily solve because the user's still going to have to find a way to verify their identity if they're doing anything meaningful. Yeah. So yes, it means that you can have alternate authentication schemes, but someone's still going to have to implement those schemes, and the user's still going to have to pass through whatever checks those schemes require. So is that better or worse than having a seed phrase and a public private key pair? I mean, it might be, but to me this is a UX problem. Yeah, actually a seed phrase and a passphrase and a crypto related to being able to sign transactions, that can be pretty much hidden from a user, providing you can hold at least some private data on behalf of the user. And you can have ways of backing it up, you can have ways of restoring it, you can have ways of exporting it. There's a lot of things that you can do that the typical user might never need to do, but can be available if you want, and that's just part of the user experience. So I think the nice thing is it does enable options. Yeah, so people can look at different ways of doing a good user experience. But the reality is, like, let's say I'm building a DApp. Yeah, I've got some awesome new DApp, and I've got my users, and I want my users to authenticate via some biometric method that they have on their mobile phones. Yeah, and I've got my own custom authentication scheme for whatever reason. Yeah, I can already do that with having my own server and doing my authentication, sending the commands to the server, and then the server relaying them to the network. Yeah, as effectively they'd be signed by the server that's running the app. So from a functional perspective, you can already do that by just having someone who's acting as a sort of relay for that particular app. Now, are you going to be able to do that verification purely on chain in a purely decentralized fashion? Maybe, but I've not seen a huge amount of good use cases where it actually makes sense for end users. Yeah. So
One of
either
the
you're going
one
to
of the
trust your app and you trust the
yeah.
firm that provides the app, or you're going to have some kind of decentralized way of verifying, but then the signature is the easiest way of doing that. So
One of the
yeah,
benefits that's touted about ERC 4337 is it's going to aid mass adoption. And then when you actually ask the pundits how will that actually happen, there's all kinds of barriers to that, like compatibility issues with between different instantiations of EVM on different chains. That the complexity of account abstraction in itself, and then um, the absolute knowledge you need to have to be able to manipulate the smart contracts in a proper way. So other people say that it'll limit adoption. Um,
yeah, I mean,
so
I'm unconvinced that it's actually useful for adoption. The I mean, what the question is, what's the barrier? Is the barrier creating keys for people and letting people use keys? I mean, no, that's purely a user interface thing. I can build a mobile app that generates keys, and the user never ever sees any of the crypto. Yeah, on Convex, all you need to do is generate an ED2559 screen, private key. That can happen behind the scenes. The user doesn't even need to know it's happened. It just needs to show a screen saying, hey, welcome, you're online. Now, someone needs to create an account for that user or relay transactions on behalf of that user. And then you don't need to create them account because you do it via some back end service. Yeah, the kind of the old Web 2 way, but it still works. Yeah. And or you need to have someone else say, I'm going to give a bit of Convex coins to my new app user so that the app itself, using the private key, can create a new account. Yeah. Or
right,
do whatever setup it needs to do. So sorry. Yes,
yeah,
you have to create an account in order to be able to provide them the coins. So the simplest model as that I see for adoption is user does not know that they have crypto keys at all. The app just connects. You do your sign up. You fill in your email. You do whatever sign up you normally expect on an app. The operator of that app, Web 2 style, creates an account, pays a small minimal quantity of Convex coins into that account so people can get started, reports back the account number to the app. So the app goes, okay, great, I now own account number 10567 or whatever. Yeah. And then the app just proceeds. The app is then fully decentralized. It's then operating on the network. It's got an account. It's got Convex coins. That is not a hard interaction. That's 10, 20 lines of JavaScript can set up those key interactions that set up that create the account and make probably one REST API request is sufficient to make that whole thing work. So it's just not a very complicated problem. And from the user perspective, all they did was download an app and sign up, and they never even knew that they have a private key and a public key and all of that kind of stuff. And they don't need to know. They shouldn't need to know. Now, if that user wants to export that key or back up that key or use that key in another app, then yes, they will potentially need to do some of
right.
the crypto stuff. But for just the basic app usage and getting someone started, it's not necessary. The other thing that we do on Convex, which I think is quite powerful, is we have this concept of an account controller. Now, the account controller is optional, but it's very important because if you set the account controller for an account, the account controller can take over and repair, restore, or hijack the account. Yeah. Now, the advantage of this, and I think it's quite powerful, is even if the user loses their keys, if you have a trusted account controller, that account controller can recover the account. Right? So if I set the account controller to be a smart contract with a 72-hour lock-in and a public request for accounts restoration that can be challenged or made by authorized representatives, so have a very complex security protection around the account restorations, but it's a smart contract, so you know exactly how it's going to behave, and you can see what's happening. And I lose my account, I can make a request to my a service provider, or maybe even do myself if it's a fully decentralized model, to have my account restored. And some verification process can then happen, and if that verification process succeeds, then my account gets automatically restored, even if I lost my keys. Yeah. So the account controller model is totally optional. Yeah, you don't have to use it in Convex if you don't want to, but it gives you a get out of jail sort of card if you make a big mistake, at the risk of, well, you have to accept whatever the rules of that controller are on how you restore it. Yeah. So it's
if you have a DApp developer, they can build in an account controller as a recovery model. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So you can either do it automatically, or you can if it's not high value stuff, you possibly do it automatically just for user convenience.
Right.
Yeah. And yes, that's kind of centralized, but if that helps the user, then maybe you want to do it. Yeah. Or you have an option. Hey, yeah, would you like my app company to be able to restore your account if you lose your keys? Yes or no? And if you click no, you can top up another dialog box saying, hey, you really sure if you lose your key, you've lost your account? And you can either go, yes, I'm sure, or actually, please protect me, or something like that. So, again, it's part of the user experience and the conversation with the user, which model is right. There's no right or wrong, but the important thing is we provide that option. If people want to do that as part of their account security and their account recovery options, that's a potentially good option.
Can you do that on other EVM models?
I think,
or is it a feature that
externally owned accounts, you might be able to do some things a little related to it, with things like smart contracts and the ability to the extent you've got some kind of upgradability built into some of the smart contracts, you may be able to set it, but it's hard. Yeah. I mean, Convex has the CVM has some specific advantages that makes it quite easy to do that. That kind of capability. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting capability. I mean, it's not going to be for everyone. Yeah. So how I might use it as a sophisticated user, I might have 20 or 30 different accounts that I use for various different purposes, but I might set the account controller on all of them to be my master account. And my master account is the account that I have a backup key in a safe somewhere, and I know that I can restore that the master account, and therefore restore any of my individual accounts if I lose any of my individual hot wallets. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing you can also set up. Yeah. As a sort of more sophisticated user, you can have a hierarchy. You would almost have a hierarchy of different accounts, and the account controller points up the tree to your more trusted accounts at the top, and that your code wallets or your highly secure accounts are at the top of the tree, and then the more risky ones or the more losable ones are lower down the hierarchy. And you can map that out, and you can decide your own strategy about how you want to protect it there. And some of those, as I say, the controller can be a smart contract or some kind of actor itself. So you can have, smart contract logic controlling the restoration of your account, whether that's a time delay or a vote or trusted third party control or something like that is all possible.
One of the arguments against 4337 was DOS denial of service vulnerability, because it's more complex verification logic. How do you feel about that? Because it's more complex, right? More attack vectors.
I mean, that's inevitably true. I mean, the more complex you make things, the more risk.
Which opens it up for account takeovers and so forth. I don't know how you could. I mean, it seems like you'd really have to even have your stuff pretty well verified before you turn something like that on. No.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is maybe a bit mitigated by the sort of verification logic in the thing, but yes, it's always going to open. The more complexity you have, there's always going to be more risks, and anything around verification of transactions. I mean, ultimately that is the big security risk in any of these systems. Is did you execute a invalid instruction, and that's what can be abused if people are able to get that access, and this is a potential way that people can do that. So, for example, if the verification's wrong, what happens? And you execute something. Yeah, I mean, you could lose assets, you could lose accounts, you can have denial of service attacks are the other big one. Yeah, if you let through transactions that don't pay for themselves, then you're basically vulnerable to some kind of denial of service or account draining attack. So yeah, it's always going to be a risk.
The news reported that Fireblocks researchers uncovered an ERC-4337 account abstraction vulnerability in the smart contract on the Unipass wallet.
Right.
But they were able to do something to mitigate the vulnerability. But there were hundreds of users that were vulnerable, and apparently they mitigated that. So I'm not really sure what that vulnerability was, but it's apparently, as soon as somebody brings something new to the market, somebody else is trying to break it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hope so. I mean, that's good. That's good security. Yeah, you want people trying to break things, and but hopefully you get it well tested before it gets to the point where you have a large public risk or a large public vulnerability. So I don't know the particular case, but it sounds entirely plausible. Yeah, there's going to be plenty of risks opened up by these kind of things. So it's exactly the same that people were hacking all of these token contracts and bridges. Yeah, the more things can go wrong, the more things will go wrong. A couple more questions from chat. Can you create an account for somebody without them knowing it has been created? So that is kind of an interesting question. And I think it depends on what you mean by for somebody. Yeah. So if Rich, if you gave me if I knew your public key, maybe from one of your other accounts, or maybe you published it somewhere, it's a public key, you don't mind about that being known to the world.
Right.
I could create an account on Convex using your public key. Yeah. So it'd be a new account. It would have a new account number, but it would be set to your public key. I could create that account, but I couldn't do anything with it because I don't have the private key. So I wouldn't be able to sign transactions for that account. So yes, the short answer is you can create accounts with someone else's private key, but the question is why? You've just given them a free account. If they want, they can use it. There's no downside to them. They're the only person with the private key, and it's cost you some trivial amount of transaction fees to do so. But even so, I mean, you can't really gain anything by creating free accounts for someone else with their public key. So the answer is yes, you can, but why?
Can you fill it with convex coins?
You could send coins to it, and you could send other kinds of assets to it. So you could create an account, you could put a bunch of things in it, and that lucky recipient has now got control of those assets. Again, so donation, you can't stop people giving you free access to stuff.
It's funny because you see that in the movies all the time with the CIA and others who create these, send money into somebody's offshore account and make them look like they're guilty of something.
Yeah, but the thing is, you've got plausible deniability.
Right.
Yeah, you've got, well, I don't know who this person who sent money to me was. Yeah, it's a public account, it's a public address. Maybe they did a typo. Yeah. I donated to charity or whatever. I mean, there's no way that anyone can prove, assuming all that they had was, okay, some random unknown account created a new account and put some coins in it and it had your public key. There was nothing in that entire process to associate you with that set of transactions, other than it's used your public key, but your public key is public information. So of course anyone can do that. Yeah, it's not necessarily someone who knows you or someone or yourself or something like that. So yes, it's possible. Oh yeah, so of course chat's open talking about anti-money laundering and stuff. So yeah, so if you were trying to detect money laundering, you might try and track down some of these things, but it would be quite hard to figure out if you weren't able to track back to the sources and uses of fund. So you maybe those funds came via an exchange, and that exchange would be the virtual asset service provider who had the client who made that transfer. So it's possible that could be traced via a service provider if someone wanted to investigate it. So probably that would be what would happen if there was a suspicion of money laundering. You'd go back to the exchange by which those assets were purchased and say, hey, where did this money come from? So it could be there could be an attempt to trace it, but it would have to go back to the service provider who had originated those funds. Another question from chat. So the account controller is a new concept. Could they control accounts for people with dementia? Yes, I mean it's actually quite a good point. Yeah, if someone's incapacitated or loses their memory or loses their phone, which is in some people cases just as bad, you might want someone else to be able to take over and provide some kind of control. So yes, you could use a account controller as a mechanism for providing a trusted third party with access to the accounts. It's almost like if you were to have a will, yeah, and if I died in an unfortunate accident, I might want to be able to will things to people, and one of the ways I might do that is by, let's say, setting the account controller on my accounts to some trusted party that would be able to act as an executor of my last will and testament and hand over whatever accounts to the appropriate people in my will. So exactly, account controllers let you do those kind of things, again, if you want to. Yeah, again, always going to caveat this: the security risk is whatever kind of account controller you choose, you need to be comfortable that the security of that account controller is good, because if they're malicious, then they can obviously take control of your account. That's the whole point of an account controller. So it is a trade-off, but yes, it could definitely be used for those kind of purposes. Good question.
One of the early comments around it was you could turn your NFT into a wallet to hold other NFTs. I'm not sure how they would do how that happens, but
I mean, yes. I mean, what you do is because remember I talked about that verification function. You can have that verification function effectively look at ownership of the NFT. as the verification mechanism, and then say, okay, well, if you own the NFT, then you can control some assets that are sort of tied to that NFT. That works. So again, we already do that in Convex in some other ways. So we have a concept in Convex of a box NFT, and a box NFT is an asset that controls or contains other assets. So it is an NFT. It's non-fungible. It's got a unique identity, and it contains a set of other assets that can be any kind of other assets. They could be NFTs, or they could be tokens, or they could be fungible currencies, all of these kind of things. And basically, you put things inside the box, and you can take things out of the box, but only the owner of the box can take it out. So if I put some assets inside the box, and then I transfer the box NFT to you, then you can take the assets out. Yeah, they effectively your assets at that point. Or you can pass the box NFT to someone else, and then they can take the assets out. But only the current owner of the box is able to put things in or out of it. So that's how you do that in Convex, and that doesn't require account abstraction at all. Yeah, it just requires a box NFT, which is managing and controlling those assets. There's different ways of achieving the same things. The other thing we do on Convex, which I think is quite interesting, is what we call a trust monitor. So a trust monitor on Convex is an actor which provides almost like a custom authorization function. Yeah, so you can ask a trust monitor, hey, I'm Mike, and I would like to vote in this board meeting. Yeah, so I go to the board meeting actor and I say, here's my vote. Now the board meeting actor goes, okay, I've just received a vote, but I need to check whether this person who's trying to vote is in fact authorized to vote. So the board meeting actor then makes a call to the trust monitor, and it says, okay, the person who is the subject is Mike's account. The action they're trying to take is a vote, and they're trying to vote for this particular board resolution. And the trust monitor will answer yes or no. Is Mike authorized to do this action? And then it returns that result back to the board actor, to the board management actor. Board management actor says, okay, yes, approved, and the vote goes through. Or if not approved, it rejects it and reports an error back because I was attempting to vote for something that I wasn't authorized to. So this trust monitor concept in Convex is a way of setting up alternative authorization schemes. And this can be any logic you like can define these authorization schemes. So I could have an authorization scheme that says I could have a trust monitor that will authorize me providing I hold at least 7 of a particular collection of NFTs. Random example, but I could write the logic that makes that particular authorization check happen. Then other people who think that that's a good way of determining, authorization can use that trust monitor. So anyone can use the same trust monitor anywhere in the network. Yeah, and the actual check that will get performed at the time is whether I have 7 of these particular NFTs. So trust monitors in Convex are very flexible, and they're a way of almost making it possible to plug and play different validation or authorization logic. And just to close the loop a little bit, the account controller can be a trust monitor. So the account controller that you set on Convex can actually be arbitrary logic that says whether a particular other account is able to take control of this particular account. Yeah, so you could write your own custom account control scheme.
So kind of in summary of all of this, it sounds like there's nothing really special in ERC-4337 that we don't already account for within Convex. Is that a fair statement?
Is that fair? I think you can already do all the things in Convex that ERC-4337 is attempting to solve. Is it a good way or a good approach, the whole external validation? Basically, the model is external verification of transactions. So you're taking the verification away from the traditional externally owned account and signature schemes into some third party that is doing that verification and doing that. Is that a good model in some cases? I mean, it might be. And you can still do that with Convex. There's nothing to stop you doing an equivalent bundler on Convex. And simulating transactions and saying, actually, do I want to run this transaction on behalf of someone else? So you can still absolutely do the same model on Convex. I haven't, or at least I haven't yet seen a use case that really justifies it. Yeah. If you're doing something truly peer-to-peer and self-sovereign, I think that the user should have their own account, their own crypto keys, and they should, and it should just be the user interface making that simple and giving the more sophisticated users the chance to export their keys and this kind of thing. If you genuinely want a curated experience in a more centralized model, so not fully decentralized, then you don't need this kind of account abstraction, because the centralized actor can do whatever they need to do, whether that's transferring assets or creating an account on behalf of the user or this kind of thing. And it's not clear to me yet whether there's a really compelling use case that can't be handled by one of those two methods. But I'll stay open-minded. I think other stuff like smart contracts, NFT being used as authorization and assets containing other assets and stuff like that. I mean, we already do in Convex in different ways, and it's less to do with the account model, but more to do with the asset model and the trust monitor and the authorization model, which I think is independent from the question of verifying transactions. The other thing I would say is that we do have in Convex, which is a little bit novel, and maybe it's probably fair to also badge it as a little bit experimental, but we have this concept of a thing called a multi-transaction. So in Convex you can have a sort of master transaction that contains a number of child transactions, and those child transactions in fact can have children as well if you really want. So this can be a way of bundling together a number of different transactions, potentially from different sources or on behalf of different users, into a single transaction with some kind of coordinated logic. And that also, I think, solves some very meaningful problems. Because the advantage of a multi-transaction is you can set the semantics. You can say either I want all of these transactions to succeed and then roll back if any of them fail, or I want to keep trying until the first one succeeds. So I'm providing like alternative executions, but I want only one to be executed, so the first one that successfully executes. Or you can say I'd like to execute them all independently, and I'd like to know which one succeeded and which one failed as part of the result. Yeah. So as a service provider who's potentially serving many different users, these multi-transactions can be very useful as a way of like bundling together a number of different instructions. So we have some options like that as well, which I think are related to the same kind of problems that account abstraction is trying to solve.
What made you think about all of these different ways of doing things ahead of time, whereas with Ethereum, obviously, it's 10 years old, and they're now just thinking about doing certain things like this?
Well, to me, it's purely about thinking about what is it that people are going to want to do. Yeah, like I'm going to want to recover my assets if I lose my crypto keys. How might I do that? So, for example, the idea of having an account controller was motivated, um, I think, motivated by two things. One was the use case, the user problem of account recovery. So, can I have a trusted third party that can recover my account if I lose my keys? Um, which is impossible in many circumstances with crypto, but with an account controller, it gives you an option to solve that problem. Um,
Right.
so the other reason that the account controller model was put in place was it enables you to have smart contracts, and actors controlling other actors. So if you imagine having like something like a DAO, where there's some kind of master DAO that has then control over a number of different child actors that are maybe performing different functions of the DAO, then the the master DAO is the natural controller of all of those child actors. So the child actors are independent. They can have their own assets, they can do their own thing, they can have their own storage, all of the capabilities of an actor. Um, and they can be, modular and self-contained. So if one of them gets hacked, then the others are still safe. Yeah, but the master
Mhm.
DAO can still control those actors, as necessary, and do stuff like, for example, having a vote if people want to actually upgrade that actor. How would they do it? Yeah, and they can do that via the fact that the master DAO is the account controller of the child DAOs. So that was the motivation for account controllers. Um, and I think that's the same for all the features in Convex. Pretty much all of them are motivated by this, at least one or maybe two real world situations where you might want that capability. And
Right.
some of the time you'll say, okay, I don't need that. But usually, if you don't need it, you just don't use it. You just ignore it. Yeah. If you want it, however, it's going to be extremely useful.
Yeah. So when you bring up DAOs, I start thinking about budgets for the different parts of and distributing budgets to different wallets.
Yeah, a great use case. Yeah, why not? You can have different sub accounts of the DAO which have their
Mhm.
own independent governance. For example, what was there was the whole I'm forgetting the name now. There was this interesting, maybe slightly academic, conceptual theory of these hierarchical modular organizations. I wish I could remember the name of the creator or the name of the system. But it was basically built along those lines where, yeah, you've got these modules and there's some kind of hierarchy of control, but you're also delegating authority and ability to act to the sub areas on this entire system. And you can do that kind of thing with these with the account controllers, and also with the trust monitors, so the authorization systems. Yeah, so you can say what level is someone authorized at, and and all of this is super cheap, yeah, and efficient on chain. So trust monitors in Convex, again, they can just be a few bytes in size. They can be really, really compact, which makes them powerful, yeah, because you can just plug them in wherever you need them, and you're hardly paying anything to use them. So it's a pretty powerful capability, and it's again it's in place so that people can assemble these kind of governance structures which are more sophisticated, and they can do that without hard coding the logic. Yeah, so trust monitor, if I decide that in fact I want to change the logic of authorization, I can just change the trust monitor. I don't have to rewrite a whole bunch of authorization code in my actor.
Got it. So we're at the top of the hour.
Awesome. Well, fascinating discussion as always. Thanks for raising the question, Rich, originally,
Yeah.
and thanks everyone on chat for asking some great questions, and helping to drive the discussion. And certainly, I think it's a fantastic area, and something we're definitely continuing building on, and sort of pushing the boundaries of what's going to be possible.
It sounds to me like 4337 is not something that we're worried about at Convex, because we can already do all the things that it does and more.
Yeah, that may be fair. I mean, we can still use it as well if we want to do something like it. But so far, we've not seen a need for anything of that based on what we already have in Convex. All right.
Okay. Cheers.
Take care, everyone. Have a good one. Bye for now.